So it's 9 o'clock, but I'm noticing there's not a ton of people here in person yet. So I'm gonna go check on our food and Wi-Fi. Be right back. We'll get started in a second. And the slide is accurate if you want to use that. showing up on the table if anyone wants to grab coffee, or we have sandwiches and bagels. If there's somebody on the chat, do you want to just let me know if you can hear me? All right. We'll just be like maybe 3 more minutes. I was waiting to see if somebody from the RU was going to join us. Is there anyone from the RU here in the audience? No. Okay. Well, then I'll do that on their behalf. Yeah, we will get started just because it's a little later than planned. So, hi, I'm Patrick, and one of the co-hosts of the Tableau user group that we run here, kind of on a quarterly basis. We're trying to keep ourselves. So that's Agata and Elena at the table, and Jonathan's here in the back in the pink fuchsia. Welcome, everybody. We have definitely over 20 companies represented in the audience, so thank you all for joining, and anyone who's returning, especially. So we'll get started with today's agenda. Two speakers for you as usual. I need to advance that on my laptop because that's where that's open. The first one here is Nicholas Lisac, and he's joining us from Cloud Invoice, Invoice Cloud, and SNHU. The second will be Joe Reynolds, who's speaking from Northeastern as well. So welcome. Is this your first time at the Roo? Oh my gosh. Okay. But through coronavirus. My goodness. Okay. So the quick bio on Nick is that he's here in Portland, Maine, so I shouldn't have been telling you all about the cruise ships. Oh my gosh. 2-year-old son and pet. I lived in New England for 12 years, originally from Oregon, and moved here in 2012. So he's at 2 different roles in analytics since graduating in 2014 and currently home at Invoice Cloud, like I said. Awesome. Covetris, Vitris, right across the street. In the chat. Welcome. All right, cool. All right, well, I'll just hand it over and let you have a crack at it. Got the clicker here too, if you want to. Oh, probably through your laptop, right? All right. Okay. Sweet. Welcome. That one. I'm gonna keep this for Q&A.
Testing. Oh, all right. Let me get my share going. Will it let me take it from you? All right. Hi, welcome. Oh, I don't want to see that. Hi, so I am Nicholas Lisac. I am here with Invoice Cloud. My team came up. Thank you guys very much for coming up. And I'll be speaking. Oh, it's not showing my screen up there. I just looked. Is it showing the screen on mine? Or did I mess it up? Sorry, guys. Share. Share. Okay. Now, if I minimize that, all right, now we're sharing. I'm here to talk about the Tableau Metadata API, which I just personally found very cool and wanted to know more about. And since I had this tool, this hammer, I went looking for projects to bang it on. And one just so happened to sort of crop up at Invoice Cloud that was a pretty good fit. So I'm going to talk through about my approach to the Tableau Metadata API and the project that we are currently using it for. So what is the Tableau Metadata API? If you know about the Tableau Data Management add-on, I have to imagine that it's using basically the same technology. It's basically the back end of what I would think is the Tableau Data Management add-on. So it's a API that is a database of all of the different data elements of your Tableau organization, whether it's a Tableau server or a Tableau cloud instance. This does not really apply to if you're just like a Tableau desktop user, because you really are working with the organizational data. So we're talking about things like the dashboards, the users, the elements on the dashboards, data sources, stuff like that, and how they're all connected to each other. You can actually go and find information about the Tableau Metadata API through the developer program portal. This is where you can find the documentation for things like the REST API and other things like that. The text on the left below the blue section there is actually just some boilerplate from Tableau. So these are use cases that Tableau actually gives you about how the Tableau Metadata API can be used. So things like discover the data and how things are connected. If you have a really big organization, or if you're like a brand new user, you might be able to understand how things are used. You could also track lineage to find out, like, we'll do an example where we're deprecating a field. You can go and try to find out where that field is used elsewhere in your organization. And in that same vein, you can perform an impact analysis. So like if we were to remove this field, which dashboards would then basically break? So the problem that we're trying to solve is that we have one big data source that we extract every day. And it is actually sort of a core data source that has a bunch of children data sources that are based on it. So this extract right now has taken up to 2 hours to run. And if you're not aware, 2 hours is the limit. If you reach 2 hours on an extract, Tableau will just stop it and you will not get your data that day. You've got to rerun it and hope that you have a better run next time. So we were averaging about 100 minutes, and that's not ideal. So we're hoping to gain efficiency by removing redundant columns, right? The width of a data set, especially if it's really long, really increases the size of the data. So we can reduce columns. We really can reduce the size of the data. Skinnier data sources get loaded up much faster into Tableau. We're also hoping to increase the simplicity. Like I said, this core data source has a bunch of sort of spin-off data sources where certain filters are essentially applied for different applications. I'm trying to understand if we can consolidate these into just one data source. So we only have one load and they're not like competing with each other to load in the morning, which should also increase the efficiency and lower our chances of running into overtime. And ultimately, this is one of the most used data sources in our entire organization. So I want to tread very, very carefully that we're not disrupting anybody's workflow, removing a field that they rely on, getting rid of their favorite thing. So that's sort of like the problem space that we're working with. And I'm planning on using the Tableau Metadata API to help us get through this. I will ask for questions in the middle. This is not going to be like, I'll only ask at the very end, because this stuff gets there's some really interesting stuff each step of the way. So just a heads up, I will be asking if you have any questions. So our very specific applied use cases for today are field deprecation. We have a field that we are moving away from in favor of a different field. But we know that there are dashboards out there that are using the old field. So we would like to reach out to those owners of those dashboards, get them to update it, and also understand the priority of which of these is impactful and not. I mean, we can see stuff in people's personal spaces. You can see stuff kind of everywhere. So we have to figure out how we can prioritize how to work through these and which maybe are like don't matter or are basically already deprecated. So the ideal search pattern for me to solve that problem would be I can search for a column name, in this case, a deprecated column, and it will give me a list of all of the assets that that column is used in. Like that's the ideal in my mind. The next one is data source consolidation. I want to find the most streamlined column set. So like I said, we have that one core data source and a bunch of spin-off data sources. I want to find the entire bucket of relevant columns that any consolidated data source would need to satisfy the current application of all of the data sources right now. So essentially, which columns are not used at all among any of the data sources is the question I'm trying to ask, because those are the columns that we can slate for deprecation as I build my consolidated data source. So for that, the tool that I would like to create would allow me to select the data tables. And then I would like to basically get back a list of all the columns that are used in those data tables, because then I can take that list of used columns, compare it to the list of all of the columns. Whatever's left over are the columns that are unused, just by inference. I'll stop for any questions there. I'm curious, are other people sort of like, yeah, I'd like to do this too? Anybody have like a big nasty bunch of data sources? Or okay, I see some nodding. Awesome. Yeah. Oh yeah, it feels so good to clean these up and like get rid of all that old cruft. All right, so here's a preview of the things that I'm trying to create. So this is just a preview of what we're working toward here. So here on the left on the green, search for a deprecated column name, and then get the list of all the workbooks that a column is used in, get the owner and the owner information. I'm not going to share the owner emails. I'll try not to share the owner emails on this presentation, not to name and shame anybody. And then on the right side, we can select a list of tables, and then we can see right there just all of the columns. So We can see how often they're used, things like that. But we'll go into that. I'll do an actual demonstration of the dashboard in Tableau that employs this. So talked a lot about the end goal. So let's talk about the metadata API itself. So the metadata API is the Wild West of data. It's not quite like something like a standard database or even a standard API, in my opinion, because everything that is connected to anything, you can walk up, you can walk down relationships, and you can get yourself a very exploded data set very quickly. So as I was formatting my query, I had to think about this, how things are related to each other. I learned a lot about how Tableau understands itself. So I'll walk through this a little bit. I've color coded it for help, just to sort of clarify kind of the level of detail of each of these things. But so the method starts by finding all the sheets and then all of the fields in those sheets. So that's like the core thing, is like, give me all of the sheets. So these are published sheets inside of workbooks in Tableau. And then I'm saying, give me all of the fields that are present on those sheets. I think that response ended up being something like 130,000 sheets. Or no, I'm sorry, fields that are used on sheets. Pretty large. So from there, so you can see sheet one, and then I just have sheet, number, ... It just means like for every sheet, you're going to have basically this little tree diagram essentially coming off of it. Starting with the sheet, moving to the field. So these fields are maybe a little different than what is intuitively what you might think. Fields include anything that's on the sheet. So if you go ahead and do like edit in, what is that called? Edit in window or whatever, where you can open it up and like do your own custom calculation without needing to make a calculated field, that's a field, right? Measure values are a field. The pill that just says measure values, like that's a field. So it's kind of weird and ambiguous what is and isn't a field. And you don't get a lot of information from that because people can name fields different things. They can use calculated fields, right? It's not super helpful just to know like what fields are on the sheets. But the metadata API can help us figure out the lineage of the fields on the sheets. So the next step up that I found useful of the field on the sheet, if it's a calculated field, what is its formula? So a calculated field is basically just a subtype of fields. What is the formula? So this, in the response, will literally give me the text of the formula that is powering that field if it has one. The other things it's going to give me are the upstream fields. So in this case, you can think of the upstream fields as any fields that are in the data source that would be like on the left pane of your Tableau workbook as you're editing it. So fields on the sheet are essentially coming from fields on the data source. Like when you drag it and drag it on, it makes that connection for you. It will reference, what's really nice about the upstream fields, I think they're called methods, is that it'll give you every upstream field. So it'll actually dig through any number of calculations to go and get you all of the fields that are on the data source that you're currently working with that feed into the field on the sheet. So you can imagine this might get really, really big if you've got calculations that reference fields, right? Like, so this list can be really long. I think the longest that I ever saw was like 17. So a single sheet field had 17 upstream fields. Now, each of those fields on your data source have columns that are upstream. So I'm going to point at the screen. So sorry for the people that are online. Upstream fields are part of that data source. Everything blue is inside your workbook. They are pulling from a data source, right? Like when you go to like your data sources in the home Tableau page, you see those data sources, not like what's on a worksheet, but like what's available on your server. Those data sources have tables in them. Those tables have columns. So I think of that as like hard data. There's no calculations there. It's what's loaded from whatever into your data source section of your Tableau. So those upstream fields on that data source reference upstream columns from a table. So the simplest would be to like take a date field, drag it onto your sheet. That date field does not have a calculation. And so the lineage would be, sheet, and then the sheet field of date has one upstream field called date, and you didn't rename it. And then it has one upstream column called date. and that is the same name as the column that's on your table. That's the absolute probably simplest way. And so if you had a simple field on your sheet, you just have that like single linearity. But these upstream fields can have multiple upstream columns. If that upstream field is a calculation that looks at two different things, like it has a if statement with a filter and then a value, those two upstream columns are going to be part of that upstream field. So again, that 17 now turns into 25. Right? It shows you all of the dependencies here. And so now I think you can understand like why this is super cool and super powerful, but it does get kind of wily, and I'll go over that in a bit. Yes.
So you got a really
Thanks. So you've got a nice visual of what all of this looks like and what you get back, but I'm guessing this is like a hierarchical like JSON payload that you're getting from
No,
the
it's
API?
nasty.
Okay.
It is nasty.
Okay.
And I will be fully transparent actually in the presentation. I don't think I'm very good at that part. So I'm sure somebody who's more of a data engineer or used to working with JSON files can navigate this a lot better than I did. But I'm going to show you my like novices like crack at it. So any questions about any of this? All right. Oh. Okay, I thought that was a question on there. I'm going to rely on you because I'm not looking. I have to rely on you to pop out any questions for me. I'm also grabbing the workbook, the owner of that workbook, and then the project that it's in, or i.e. the folder, right? And that'll just help us to isolate things like I might not care if it's in an archived folder, right? That dependency. So the steps that I took for my methodology were to workshop the query and the GraphIQL web tool, and then a little bit of Postman. Both of those are free tools. I recommend just working primarily in the Metadata API GraphIQL interface. It's native to Tableau. It's super slick. It has all the documentation there. Postman was a little bit more helpful for me for building, like, because it essentially can scan how things are connected and give me a little help. And then I saved that query that I wrote in there as a JSON file. I just put it into a text file, changed .txt to .json, and saved it. I cannot undersell how much time I spent on that, by the way. So depending on what you are trying to do, it may take some time. I have a very specific application, a very specific data shape I was trying to get. I will share my query with you so you can all have it as a starting point. We'll send it out after in like the follow-up email. Then I built a data pipeline in Nime. So Nime is like a data pipeline tool. It's similar to Alteryx if you've ever used or heard of that. I had to do lots of different steps. Interact with the REST API to get like an authentication token. I had to create pagination because it'll only give you a certain number of records. And so I have to figure out how many times I need to ask the API for a response and then paginate through all of them. My answer was 52. I need to create 52 individual queries to then have it chug through, run the queries. Then I get 52 big, nasty JSON outputs. I then need to figure out what to do with those. And again, I cannot undersell how much time that took me. It was fun for me to learn. I'm assuming there are better ways to do it than I did. But you will get 52 JSON outputs in my case, and got to figure out how to put them into the shape of the table that you will find most helpful. And really, it's up to you because you'll get the lineage, but it won't like, I don't know, it won't make it a table for you. You've got to figure that part out yourself. Once I had the table, everything else was easy. I literally just took the table, saved it as a CSV, loaded it into Tableau, and did the actual analysis. Any questions on this part? I will do a demo of all of those tools. Great. Live demo. And I'm going to move this. I need the space. So first thing I will show you all is the GraphQL. So what are you talking about?
Oh, on here.
Oh, that's your screen.
That's this screen. So that's this is. State on this.
Oh, okay. You click on that. Maybe just one click. There we go. All right, cool. So if you have a Tableau Cloud instance, you could just go here. All you need to do, and the instructions are in the PowerPoint that we will be sending out afterward, is you take your pod, after you've signed in, I'm assuming you take your pod right here, tableau.com. You just replace the last part with this metadata/graph IQL, and you're good to go. So this is the base of the query that I wrote, and I'll kind of walk through it to explain how it relates to that picture that I had showed you before. So starts with the Sheets connection. The Sheets connection is just a way that you can, it delivers you a payload that you can paginate through. There is a Sheets version, but the Sheets connection is what I used. Nodes is essentially just the name of the sheet. So get the sheet, name, the ID of the sheet, and then the workbook that it is in. Then I got information about the workbook. Our workbook has an owner, getting some information about the owner, and then down to sheet field instances. So those are the sheet fields. Those are the fields that are on the sheet itself that you'll be trying to get. So everything you can see is upstream of there, all of the indentation. So from the sheet fields, if it's calculation, give me the formula, give me all the upstream fields. If those are calculations, give me their formula, and then the data source of those upstream fields. For those upstream fields, give me all of the upstream columns that are on them. And for those columns, give me the table that they are on and the name of the table. This part is a little strange. You can have different types of tables. And so I needed to give it a different methods for each different type of table. I think pretty much all of ours are just database tables. I don't think we use virtual connections or custom SQL very much. So, but I did have to have all of those to make sure that I wasn't absent any data as I was requesting it. So I will go ahead and run this. Oh, and then at the very top, see what says first 1 offset 0? I'm asking it just for one record as for this demo. Offset is basically your pagination, right? So if you say 100 offset 1, it's going to give you number 101 through 200 or something like that. This is what it looks like. So I got 52 outputs, each with like 5,000 each of these, like very, very long numbers of sheets. And so this is what we had to parse through. But we can see here, and I'll just demo on my computer here. The sheet name is cycle time. Here's its ID. It's in the engineering scorecard workbook. The first field is resolution date. So this is one of those simple ones. It has an upstream field, also a resolution date, and it has an upstream column, also a resolution date, and it's coming from the table that I have named Jira issue core. So that's a very simple one. I'm going to scroll down to show you what a complicated one looks like. All right, I think this one. So this one is called cycle time text. This is a field where I take a few different values and actually just create sort of like a string of text to like make a sentence to display the data in like a tooltip or something. So it is a formula. So it's showing us the calculation here. It does have like the HTML like backslash type things for when it's like an escape character. So it doesn't look exactly like you would see it on the screen. But this says 80% of work items were completed within, and then it uses a calculation, and then it has the average completion time as well. So upstream of this is a field that I just named 80%, and it is a formula. So you can see the formula for that field. And then upstream of that formula, it has using the column primary key and the column duration cycle time days. And we can continue down. There's an upstream field called average completion, and then it has upstream columns. So you can see how this kind of can explode and show you all the dependencies there. I'll stop here because I think this is one of the coolest parts, and people may have questions. If you don't, I won't be offended. All right. Oh yeah, sure.
Actually, I have a question. So I was noticing on your diagram before, it takes a while before you get to a table column and then a table.
Yeah.
So it seems like for everything you bring in from any data source, Tableau has at least this back-end notion of like a field. And I guess that's a Tableau kind of abstraction. So
yeah, a field is like a combination of, could be a calculation, could be a column. So like a measure value, it doesn't have an upstream column because the pill on the sheet is just called measure values. So there's nothing there. So, but it wants to show you that you have the field measure values on that sheet. So you won't have an upstream column in that case. So yeah, a field can be different things, but usually it's going to be ultimately based on some data from some table. But if you make a field that is just a string of text that doesn't reference other data, that's also a field.
Okay. So, but it's probably still helpful to think like if you're in desktop or something, you're not really thinking about tables and columns. You're really thinking about fields because you could at any given time go in and change something. You're not really changing the table and the column.
Yes.
You're really changing the field. And so that field is a Tableau kind of abstraction that
Exactly.
you're dealing with. Okay.
Exactly. But what's nice is I can tell, like if you are working with a specific data source and you create a field and that field is just straight up from one of the columns, but you rename it, I can tell the lineage up to what column that you renamed, which is really nice for an exercise like we're trying to do today. Cool.
That's actually really interesting to see that of the column renaming.
Yeah, and you can tell who's renaming columns. Ask them, why are you renaming our columns? These are what they're supposed to be. Question back there? Can you pass the mic?
Hello? Okay. I'm sorry if I missed it. I know you said something about the Tableau data management add-on. Is that necessary? I know you can access Metadata API without it. Is it necessary to do this?
No. In fact,
No.
this is like an alternative to. I'm
Perfect.
under the impression that the data management add-on is built on top of the Tableau Metadata API because why wouldn't it be? So they've basically just given you the potential to kind of do your own data management type of work without paying for the whole suite. I'll also say, as I was doing my research, I did find a PDF that mentioned that things were changing with the data management add-on and it may become free on the 25th of this month. So don't take my word for that, but I found that like after I was like 75% done with the presentation, I kind of hung my head and go, all right, well, I'll still do the presentation, even though it might not be relevant in a month. But yeah, they could change that. Like I said, I found it like hidden in a PDF of a paper inside of documentation. So that may or may not actually be the case. Yeah, in the back.
We've got the data management add-on and we still have to use the metadata API to do things like it's great for browsing. So to like give to the end user and they can do some browsing. But we just gave it to one of our database administrators and they were like, okay, I need to see XYZ. And it's not easily available through the UI that Tableau provides. So
Yeah.
I'm digging into the metadata API this week to try to build that.
Cool. Yeah, it just gives you that total control over exactly what you're trying to get. And you can get a bunch of stuff. Like I said, this query that I wrote has a specific application that I'm trying to get at. The biggest thing for me, you have like the TS admin data sources. They'll go down to the workbook level, the user level, the event level, people viewing workbooks. They will not show you any information about the fields or the data. And that was my initial frustration and why I thought maybe I could use this tool. And why I'm getting all of the IDs in my query. You can data blend into those Tableau admin data sources using, say, like a workbook ID or a sheet ID to then start counting, okay, well, so-and-so many people are viewing this workbook and this field is used on it. So I can ascertain that this field is a useful field, whereas this other field is only on one workbook with no like views. And so this field is not as important. All right, I'm going to keep going. So the next demo that I'm going to do is KNIME, and I'm really just going to walk through the steps that I took to extract and process the data. If you have questions about KNIME, I'm happy to talk to you, but I think we're running short on time. Potentially, I have a little bit more to go. So you can come and talk to me. We'll send out my email. You can email me if you want information about that. But KNIME is a free tool. It's very similar to Alteryx, and I've tried to make this as pretty as possible to walk everybody through. So each of these nodes are little tools that are doing a function for me. So that set of nodes up at the very top is authenticating into the Tableau REST API and getting myself a bearer token. This is the token that I need to then go talk to the metadata API. It expires after a certain amount of time. So I log in with my credentials. You can sign up for a personal access token in your Tableau Cloud instance if you're allowed to do that through your administrator. Once you have that token, that's the token that you can then use to like access different APIs. So I get my bearer token. That little orange one here is where I'm reading in the JSON file that I just literally, so in the previous screen on that metadata API, I literally just took that, put it into a text file. We then, I slapped those together, the bearer token and the JSON file. This is how I dealt with pagination. There are better ways to do it. Probably recommend a loop or something where you query, you can get the number of responses back, do the math and like create it. I just did it this way because it was simpler for me to manage by hand. Then, so this is where basically it takes my one query and it turns it into 52 queries, each with the pagination section. here is where I actually start. So this will query the Tableau Metadata API 52 times. It's going to, every single one will go through, go through, go through. The step after is because when I was building this, they had a huge bug, and I actually found the bug report in their, I don't know what that's called, their bug report system. I was getting a lot of timeout failures, like a ton. Now I usually only get like 1 or 2 over the 52. So the bottom section there just catches any of the things that failed, and it just reruns them and tries them again. The output is 52 Tableau or 52 JSON output files. Each of them are really, really big. Like I said, I think we ended up with something like 130,000 rows at the very end. So you can imagine just how many pieces of JSON that we have. And then I've got to go through all of them and parse them all out. So this is the part that I am pretty sure I am bad at this. Each of these sections is essentially going into the JSON and just isolating the parts that you care about in that step. So you can imagine each of these sort of like rows of processing is analogous to one of those columns that I had in that original graph. So like one might be going just after the data tables and getting the information about the data table, and like maybe it'll keep some meta information about like which query was this on, which sheet was this on, stuff like that. So I can basically join it back together. So yeah, I'm going through, I'm grabbing the sheet fields, the upstream fields, the table columns, and I'm basically turning them into each their own little table. And then I'm joining that table back to itself. So I have 52 queries. So that's like the first level of detail. Then I have, I don't know how many sheets I ended up with, but many, many sheets, everything joined to the sheets, everything joined to the fields, everything joined to the columns. So you end up with the same sheet data in that column repeating a bunch of times. So this is not tidy data. Well, maybe it is tidy data. You have that sheet repeating a bunch of times with all of the upstream field column, whatever combinations that are flowing into it. So you do end up with a really, really big table, but it has all the data you would need. So if I select for a sheet, it's going to grab all of those rows that are associated with that sheet. So it's going to show me all of the fields, columns, et cetera, that are on that sheet. Any questions about this? Like I said, if you're interested in KNIME itself, I can take you through that. Like we could just chat about it, or I can send you a link. The PowerPoint will have a link on where to get more information about KNIME as well. Anybody tell me what I did wrong? How to do this better? Or is this just terrible? Is this just how JSON works? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of cringed faces in the audience. Yeah, okay. Cool. All right, back to the presentation. So here's the information. This will be in the presentation that we sent it afterward for GraphQL. It'll tell you how to get there, what to put in. I always lose this information. So this is really good to reference. And then here, this just goes over my workflow for KNIME, my process here. If you were trying to like replicate the steps that I went through in order to try to get to this information and parse it out. The information for KNIME is at just knime.com. It's open source, it's free, it's super cool. And it's got lots of great tools. If you're used to working with Alteryx, it will be weird because it is a little bit different. But I use it personally, and I think it's a great tool. I'm not like a Python genius or anything, so I use tools like this to help bridge that gap. All right, so let's talk about the actual results. So I actually made this presentation before we got the initial results, and now I put the initial results in here. So our core model has 34 million rows and 179 columns. That's just for the main model / table. There are other sort of like replicated baby versions, each with their own filters and stuff applied to it. It takes 100 to 120 minutes to create the extract. I went over that. And it has 10 plus child data sources that use it as a base. So it's a sales pipeline model. So it's going to have things like pipe gen, sort of what's coming down the pike, pipe coverage, one of those salespeople actually working bookings. So each of these are different slices of that same core model that we use. And then there's really highly analytical models that we take a snapshot of our sales pipeline every day, which is why there's so many columns in here. And so if you wanted to do a really like a change capture type analysis, you'd have to use a lot of different snapshots to get that information. So the potential efficiency gains that I found, oh shoot, I forgot the most important part. Oh no, I skipped ahead. Here it is. These are the tools that I promised I would make. I'm so sorry. I went right back to the PowerPoint presentation. So we're going to start with examining the table columns. So really sorry about jumping around. So I've selected the column name route to market. This is where we're trying to update from a route to market to a segment field for the analysis and dissection of our sales pipeline data. So what this allowed me to do, I select route to market. Now I have, this is the owner here. This is their ID. I also am getting their email, so I know who it is. I've got the project name that it's in. So these ones are in a dev space. That's ad hoc. If we scroll down, looks like staging, data sources. Ooh, executive data books. That seems important. So it is using, in a workbook called pipeline generation, a sheet field called new versus existing. So this sheet field is using upstream the route to market column. I've cut out all of the stuff in the middle, the upstream fields, all of that. I just wanted to know the name of the sheet field so that I can say to this workbook owner, who may or may not be sitting in this presentation right now, that in this project folder on this worksheet, you have a field that is using route to market that we have deprecated. And it's used 6 times. So that means that route to market could be in multiple different sheet fields on that one sheet. And it's had 389 access events, which is actually pretty high. So people are looking at this workbook and it could potentially be wrong. So that's going to mitigate, potentially people communicating wrong numbers. It's really going to help us prioritize which of these we need to deprecate. We can see up here, we've got a few of these workbooks that have no views on them. So this long-term coverage review that's in dev, I don't think I would recommend that person prioritizes that and fixes all of those fields. Even though there are a lot of fields that use route to market, it's not making an impact on the company. So with the metadata API, and this is blending with the events data set inside of the Tableau admin portal, you can see sort of what's being used. For the second use case here, we're going to examine the data sources. So I have already pre-selected a bunch of tables here. All of these self-service tables, they all use that one upstream pipeline workbook. And so what I have here, I made a little hierarchy, but we can see here's the table name. Here are all the columns that are used on that table name in our organization, the number of times they are used, the number of workbooks they are used on, and then this is just going to be one upstream column. So this is just going to be, for this level of detail, everything is going to be one here. So we can see this one, qualified date, very important for our pipeline. Opportunity ID, obviously very important for our pipeline. We use Salesforce, you might recognize that field name. What you can do is collapse the hierarchy I made. Let Tableau do its thing. I think I woke it up. I think it was sleeping. Drum roll. All right, if it doesn't do it in a second, I'll skip ahead. All this is going to do is it's going to give me a list of all the columns that are used on all of those tables. I will literally just download that crosstab and then cross-reference it with the list of fields from the SQL statement that generates that table. That's it. Now I have, there we go, a list of all the fields that I can potentially deprecate, and certainly I have the fields that I cannot. So the import start date cannot deprecate, solution area cannot deprecate. Maybe we could think about deprecating some of the ones at the bottom if they're only used on one dashboard, right? So we can, this empowered a discussion that we could have with our analysts and our stakeholders to allow us to understand what's important to them, so that we can move forward on making a better quality data model for them to use. So now I'll go back to the presentation. Any questions about the Tableau stuff? Super simple workbooks. I just was trying to get it here to visualize and be able to access the data and filter through it. Cool. All right, back. Do I have till 10-ish? Okay. No, we're yep. Okay. Yeah. So we'll go back here. We found 98 columns. Well, out of 179, 98 literally were not used in any Tableau dashboard. That doesn't mean that they weren't used, for example, in the filtering of any of the child data sets. So that analysis had to be done in a more traditional style. But at least those 98 could be isolated and cordoned off. So I didn't have to analyze 179. I had to analyze 98. Sent out the list to the analysts and stakeholders, and they gave me their favorite ones they have never used before. So we ended up not with 98 that we could deprecate. We ended up with 30 that we could deprecate because people had their favorite things that they like to have on the shelf. 98 public, right. So there I think it does not look into unpublished workbooks or sheets that aren't published and stuff like that. So there is a limitation. I forgot about that. There is a limitation potentially to the metadata API. It also cannot see onto desktop. If you are having users that are saving only on desktop, you may want to ask them if you can delete something or merge something. So if we removed all 98, I'm just trying to do the simple math, we could reduce the total table size by 2.8 billion cells. So that would be like 98 times 32 million, right? Like just like if we take those, remove them. Sure, there's null data, whatever. Not all data is created equal, but that would be just a total table size reduction of that much. We combined it with other improvements, so like reducing the number of snapshots we have by finding the snapshots that mattered versus the ones that didn't. The initial test runs have our load time into Tableau at about 4 minutes versus 100. So these things, when you combine column width and length at the same time, is exponential because that's how geometry works. I'm assuming that that makes it much harder for Tableau to load in and exponentially increases the amount of time it takes. So like I said, we're down to 4 minutes. We added a few more things back in, a few more of the snapshots we wanted, a few more of the fields. I think we're sitting around 7 minutes right now to load in. Still a huge improvement from 100. Now for consolidation, the remaining 81 columns that were not part of those initial 98, we have to keep those because if we got rid of them, any of those workbooks that are currently using them would just fail, right? The data wouldn't be there, the worksheet wouldn't load. So we know that we have to save those, but it gives us a starting point of if we were to consolidate all of these, what is important to people so that we make sure that nobody is forgotten as we're trying to do this analysis. Versus if I needed to sit down, and this saved a lot of time, versus if I needed to sit down as like a business stakeholder and do like a business analyst type interview with all the major stakeholders and how they use it, they could forget something, you know, they might downplay something or whatever. This gives me the hard data of what is and isn't used and gives me that like starting point to work from. Yeah, so the idea is that we can get these 11, 12 different data sources down to one, 100 minutes for the longest one, and like cascading down as they get smaller for the rest of them. It's going to save us a bunch of compute time. It's going to save us, for me, complexity. I hate it. I hate complexity when it comes to this kind of stuff. Reduces it down to a single point. It also means that we make an update to the data model, everybody gets it because everybody's using the same one. We don't need to make the same change like 7, 12 times. All right. That is the end of the presentation. So I would love to hear any questions. Yeah.
I have one. Approximately how many creators do you have in your server environment?
Well, that are actually creating stuff or that are licensed?
Both numbers would be good. I'm just, you made the comment about this doesn't work on Tableau desktop. And so starting to think through some of the like logistics of managing that and removing things. And it sounds like this core data set is well used and understood by 6 people, 60 people. Like, I'm not sure what that range looks like.
Under 10, around 10.
Around 10. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we don't have a large instance, but we were running into this big problem that we're trying to solve.
Totally. Yeah, no, I asked the question more so like at a different sized organization, we would maybe need to take a different approach.
Yeah, especially if you've got people that are doing a lot of desktop work alone. Yeah, you may need to take a different approach. Yeah. Other questions?
Where I've started exploring that, one of the things is using the Tableau server data sources and trying to look at indirect measures of that. So like, where do we have access data source events for published data sources that people on desktop who are hitting published data sources will get access data source events.
Yep.
And then we can start seeing trying to see some of that activity that isn't just hits on views.
That's true. And, you know, I would hope that like if even 50 or 70% of your work was being published online, because we're looking at the list, if it even had one instance of being a sheet field, we're going to include it in the keep bucket, that there aren't too many things that are only being used in desktop. I think that would be kind of a strange edge use case, but still much easier to mitigate than if you had no right starting point. Yeah. I was actually curious if anybody could see like other applications of the metadata API that are like swirling around your heads that is not necessarily the use case that I provided here.
I know we used at Comcast where I was a couple years ago, the TWX files, TWB, I'm sorry, when you save a workbook are just XML in the background. So we used Python to scrape all of that, to get like a lot of stuff, and then report it out, sort of like like an automated version of a documentation, so that if a user like a user of a dashboard wanted to know details about a calculation or how something was being done in the background, that they could self-serve on that to a degree.
Oh, yeah, you could build something like that with the metadata API too, right? That dashboard that I provided could be, user facing. They could search for the dashboard. They can get a list of all the fields. They can even select the sheet that they're looking at, get a list of all the calculations that are available there.
Totally. Here we go.
So we do use custom SQL a lot. So when I hear consolidation, like that's the kind of thing I think of. Like, do we have 10 identical or very similar custom SQL objects out there that could all be using one upstream ETL
So you'd be able
object?
to, so you could do that. I think what you'd be able to get out of the metadata API is like the SQL itself that is the custom SQL. And then you'd get all the columns that are like attached to that data source and stuff. I think it wouldn't go any further upstream. Like, it's not going to go into your Snowflake. Like, you'd have to use a different tool to understand if these two queries were similar to each other or not, if they were using the same, like, SQL data sources that are in your database. It could be helpful, but I don't think it would be as helpful in that regard. Also, I saw that when I was looking at these, most of the custom SQL data sources, the tables were literally just named custom SQL. So it was very hard to understand which things were and were not related just using their name versus, we have a naming convention that we were using for our tables of like self-serve pipeline, blah, blah, blah. So all of those are probably using the same base table. One in the back.
I was just literally this morning writing up a bug about it. So the Lineage API tries to parse custom SQL, and it is successful in some cases. But I have one case where there's 7 different prep flows that each have a custom SQL input that are doing different things, and they all show up as one lineage table.
Oh.
So it's the custom SQL is just, it sort of works, but then it's into this place where it actually creates more problems.
Yeah, we don't have prep, so that's interesting take. I wouldn't have thought that is how that worked.
So it's so it tries, but it does have the, like you said, you can get the custom SQL out of the lineage. One of the other things we've done using the metadata API is because we can see the formulas, we can see who's doing what in some ways. So like who's using certain kinds of calculations in Tableau. And then like if somebody's writing a lot of LODs, they're probably an expert in that.
Yeah.
So as a community building.
A fun exercise you could do is just filter for fields with calculations and then group them by field name and see who's using different calculations for the same named field and see where the differences are, if there are any.
And we talked about maybe putting even notes into like getting people in the organization best practice wise to do like hashtag, and then the like nice written documentation note of a field, like the logic behind it, or that they implemented it on this date or something that could be scraped out automated wise and brought up to the surface. That would be really awesome for like people who leave the organization and then the next analyst takes over. There's like a little bit of a breadcrumb thing going on. Any other questions in the room or on the chat? I don't see. One down front, and then maybe we'll close it up there because we're running.
This is great. Thank you. I'm curious more on the downstream for you guys using this, or have you thought about using this to inform some of the policy on kind of the data engineering side? So you do a cleanup exercise. This is what we found. We made huge strides and improvements. Can you use that to inform how data ends up back in Tableau?
Yeah. So we're the culprits. So we are writing the SQL from the core tables that our data engineering team is providing to us and maintaining. So we wrote that core table, and we also wrote all 11 of the child tables as well. And he made a conscious decision to pull all of those in. So we are the bad guys, policing ourselves in this instance. And it just happens organically, where somebody needs something, and it just grows and it grows. You already made one copy, so let's just do a different copy for a different use case. The point originally, I believe, was to try to make it really self-service for our end users, because we do have end users who are creators who are on our team who are providing the data. And so they could go to like the PipeGen data source and know that that was going to work for a PipeGen analysis. They could go to the coverage data source for coverage, bookings for bookings, et cetera. The process that we're taking is, right now, I'm going to take that core data model. I've looked at all of the different filters that are applied for each of the other submodels, and I'm putting them just literally into calculated fields saved into the data source. And then I'm creating little Boolean filters. So if I want PipeGen, I open the one data source, and then I just select the PipeGen filter equals true. And now I can do my work. So it's consolidating, but keeping mostly the same like workflow pattern for those folks. Thank you very much.
Sweet. So, let's say 10 minutes for bathrooms and grab some food for folks in the room. If you're on the chat, just be patient with us and we'll be right back. I think we're going to get started again. We've got Joe Reynolds here from Northeastern, and I guess just before we get started, I wanted to publicly say thank you to the Rue Institute for hosting our 5th event. Since we've got started in 2023, we've been here and it's been our home. It's obviously really, really gorgeous to have the view and all the tech that helps us do these meetings hybrid. So again, thank you to Rue. I teach here now, so I'll be coming back in the fall to teach like a data warehousing class for one of their master's programs in analytics. But that's one of probably about 12 degree program certificates that they offer here. Business intelligence, data science, project management, biochemistry, lots of really advanced things that other universities in the area, when they first came here, weren't offering. And you might have seen this week, they just did the groundbreaking on the bean factory north of here on 295, is going to become, as of 2026, the new headquarters for the Rue Institute at Northeastern. So everyone's really excited about that. I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
My volume. How's my volume? Good? Everybody can hear me? Hey, I'm Joe Reynolds. I'm a senior data analyst at Northeastern. Maybe a show of hands. Who is either taking coursework at the Rue or is affiliated with Northeastern in some way? About a third of folks in the room. Yeah. Oh, Ben. Hey, Ben. Thanks for coming, Ben. Way to maybe get this out of the way.
You probably just scoot that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So today you'll get a little peek behind the curtain of data at Northeastern. I titled this dashboard, or this presentation, if a dashboard falls on the Tableau server, because a couple of things I want to address is, if you find a dashboard in the wild and you want to retrofit it, or if something breaks, inevitably something's going to break. Right. I'm about 2 years into my data career. I've learned that you're not a Tableau analyst until you run into trying to aggregate an aggregation error and, bushwhacking through a server to make sure everybody's got permissions for the thing that you're building. And ultimately something's going to break. Right. So this is a little story about how I arrived. There was a dashboard that was a known quantity. It was broken and folks wanted it back. And sort of in doing that investigation, we realized bringing it back as it wasn't going to be sufficient to meet the current need, right? So we had to add to it. To complicate the situation, this dashboard is maintained by colleagues of mine in a central unit. And so I had to work with them to get this up to snuff. And after that, we developed a new process. So this, Nick, I gotta say, I thought I liked puzzles, but you're really raising the bar. My presentation, if you're mental real estate, this is gonna be a lot more about process rather than technicals. So just wanna set the stage there. We will touch on, there are some technical things, we'll touch on them, but we're not gonna dive deep into anything. If you have further questions, if you need resources, contact me after and we'll get you squared. Come on. Nope. It was working before. Clickety clack. Okay. We're going to go old school. All right. So would like to direct attention to sort of 3 focus areas, right? When you're trying to modernize a data process. First is working across the aisle. You're going to need to collaborate. You want to collaborate. You want your peers to bring their knowledge to your problem along with yours. 2 heads are better than 1 kind of thing. The myth of self-service analytics is something I have run squarely into. I don't know, can anybody else sympathize with the idea that if you build it, they may or may not come? Yes, okay, everybody's head is going up and down, so that's a good sign. I'm subtitling this bullet, aim for the value zone. And I'm not going to give away my secret quite yet, but I'll explain what that means in a moment. We live in an attention economy. There's a hint there. And this is all sort of converging and leading to the idea that data is a habit, right? For data to have meaning in an organization, people have to sort of understand well the metric or metrics that they're looking at and what kind of value they have to the organization. So a lot of that is about habituation. My background actually is not data. My background is product development, sales, and running around the world. But I mention this because if you've meandered into a data career from something else, you belong here, right? That was something I really struggled with early on, was, and still is, imposter syndrome, right? And I've learned over the past couple, this is very vindicating for me to come back here and have something to share. When I started this journey and hooked on with Rue, in 2020, it was the result of my media career having been blown up by COVID. So, I'd worked in media for a decade. I was very data oriented in those ways and had sort of been tracking towards this. And then, the Rue was giving out scholarships, and it seemed like the time to dive in. And I hooked on with Northeastern thereafter, and the rest is history. So, okay, so CPS, College of Professional Studies, is one of the schools, one of the colleges that is present here at Rue. I think the College of Engineering and Bouvet is also here in some capacity. CPS is a bit of a different model than some of the other colleges at the university. We have a fleet of part-time professors that help us execute across 6 campuses. Nick, I saw that you were with SNHU. And didn't know you were trying to get recruited today, but we have degrees at all levels, right? It's the important thing here, kind of sizable. And again, we have a huge part-time staff along with our core faculty that deliver education to about 8,000 people a year. So it's quite a lot of irons in the fire. We'll teach 3,600 class sections this year across 6 campuses. So it's there's a lot going on, and we will confer about 3,000 degrees. So because hopefully that sets the stage. If you're not familiar with how college is structured, everybody knows college has a dean, right? But then there's usually like a CFO type senior dean and someone who's more centered on academics. And then a bunch of, there's actually more than 5, but that's all that would conveniently fit on my slide. Associate deans that have control over their domain. And these are the folks that have P&L responsibility, right? Responsibilities cascade up in every organization. This is probably very intuitive and I don't need to go over that, but the senior deans, invest and help change management. And our dean, of course, is responsible for all of it, and including our vision and sort of external affairs. Those are everybody's my stakeholder. Those are my maybe primary stakeholders. And this is the dashboard in question. Maybe this is a good time to ask a question. Let me go back. What is a metric you think these people might be interested in? Anybody? My man, this guy over here. What's your name? Thank you, Tyler. Nailed it. So course billing credits, credit hours, these are terms of parity, right? I might say the same thing in different ways. If you went to college, you paid in credit hours, right? You paid by billing credits. So what we're seeing in this dashboard is we're going to blow this up. This is very hard to see. You're going to see each piece individually, so can't tell what's going on. Don't freak out yet. But we're seeing the lead up to a term, right? We're seeing the lead up to a term start, and then you can see everything flatten out in our line charts. And this is a dashboard that is recurrent information being delivered every week. Each point on the line is a new week, and there is a new data point that is needing to be attended to. And that's how we're going to get back to habits and talk about habits and how we're developing them. Apologies that the numbers are redacted. I did want you to see that there are marks and that tables are populated with data, but this is going to go into the Tableau archive, and it's not appropriate to have this live there. So you'll just have to use your imaginations. I trust you all have one. All right, so what we can see here is that, I think we're going to highlight it. Yeah, we start 12 weeks out at the start of a term, and a term runs 12 weeks. We have 6-week classes. So each week there's a new data point on Tuesday mornings, and people get busy. And even if they know that they need to be tracking with this, there isn't necessarily a mechanism that we have to make sure that they're getting what they need when they need it. I do want to say, actually, let me just go back. When we started, these filter boxes were not here. This was just a college rollup, right? So it wasn't working. It was just the full view of the college, but didn't have enough specificity to be meaningful for each of those users that we talked about. Okay, so, right, we can see the term start. And even into the first week of the term, people are still adding classes, right? And then a couple of weeks in, we have add drop, and you see a little drop in the chart. And then we have a second term or second part of term, so people are registering for classes. If they didn't already, most people have. And then after the second term start, you can see a little slight drop off. Not a whole lot of change after the term starts, but just to give you a sense of how we're tracking this, we want to switch over to the next term view after add drop, right? Because now we're concerned or paying attention to what's going on with the next term. So there's this dashboard persists longer than it's relevant in some ways. So again, when we're talking about habit building, we want to accommodate that and not have people looking at things that are only relevant in certain cases. Like not all programs have a second half start. If you do, the data is available to you, but maybe it's not entirely relevant for everyone. Similarly, or this also breaks out into what I call the 4-box. These are populations we care about because depending on who you are, you need different services. So if you're a new student, you need a different amount of attention than a continuing student. New students also become continuing students from a revenue perspective. So it's important to know kind of like what your pipeline looks like. And similarly, domestic students versus international students have different needs. And one of those is scheduling. So for international students, by federal regulation, your program has to have on-ground components. So there's a lot of operational things that we need to accommodate for there. So we break it out into the 4-box, and then the table I kind of chopped up so we could actually read it here. Imagine it's wide. And these are just some summary statistics of, head count. This dashboard also newly incorporated unique head count of students, whereas previously it was just credit hours. And that's done through a parameter, which we're going to talk about very shortly. But there's also, of course, billing credits and some sort of derivative metrics that show progress year over year in the table. So what is next? Right. So if this was already known and all you had to do was go revive it, what did you make better, and how are you making it more valuable? And the answer is by adding this field in particular. Program data allows us to scale right down and see what's going on in any one given program, and then also re-aggregate those things so that we can roll them back up into portfolios. For instance, excuse me, our GSE program, our school for educators, right, is 7 programs. So we can roll those 7 programs up into a portfolio view, or our undergraduate world, or what have you. We needed to be able to disaggregate to be able to re-aggregate meaningfully. So this is a huge deal. This was the first time we had insight into program level data at the college, so it's been really successful. But again, throughput. And how do we scale it? We'll get there, but really quickly, this is all driven by 6 different parameters. they're all the same parameter, essentially. There's just 3 of them per, there's 3 for the visualization, there's 3 for the table, right? So the calculated field calls the parameter, if field, or if string, then field, right? Nothing super complicated here, but that's what's going on behind the scenes. We're going to watch it in action, and I'm going to narrate. Nick, unlike you, I didn't trust myself with a live demo. So, oh yeah, these match up here. P.S. Orange is my favorite color. It's uniquely human. Actually, most animals have a very difficult time discerning between orange, brown, and green. So if you remember nothing else, orange is amazing, not just because it doesn't rhyme with anything. It's a uniquely human color. All right. So here we are. The parameters live here, right? They're all driven here. You can see sort of select 1, select 2, select 3. And then there are slicers on the filter. So you can take the parameter and slice it up. Or there are filters on the parameter, excuse me, that allow us to further disaggregate the parameter. And now we're going to watch it in action. Okay. Oh, I've been talking about billing credits this whole time, and I guess when I started this recording, it was on headcount. So you're going to immediately watch the dynamism of this as it gets going. When it's select back to course credits, there you go. So you can toggle back and forth and see straight headcount. If you're someone in operations who's doing scheduling, you can see course billing credits. If you're an administrator who cares about finance, I think I'm going to pause this here. So yeah, so that when you deselect, it didn't go blank on us. And here you're going to see me select for our analytics program. Right, you could choose other programs, and that's how we would re-aggregate into a portfolio. We just make multiple selections. And I'm going to turn this back on, and we'll be able to see what's going on just in analytics, right? There you go, boom. So now you got your key 4 populations in a visual breakdown right next to the aggregation of the program. You can bring that down into the table below. So we're going to select the program parameter here, and then add the campus parameter. Right. So now this is going to dynamically break out where analytics is running for CPS across all of the Northeastern network. And because we're at the root today, we're going to select for Portland and see how the alma mater is doing. Bring that back into the visualization by selecting the parameter up top for Portland. And here we go. Look at all the growth this year. That's incredible, right? Switching over to headcount, and yeah, equally impressive. It seems like I guess everybody's going to be making friends this year. All right. Is this advancing? Okay, yeah, so it's been really successful. Touchdown, right? But started here. This is everybody's seen this. This is the dreaded screen for me anyway. And that brings us right to like, how'd you do it, right? And it's all about collaboration. Could not have done this alone. Oh, a huge shout out to other RU alums, Molly Lindbergh, Chloe Height, who work in our enrollment management office, helped me develop this. Tria Basu, my co-op student, who helped me with the second portion of the show. I'm surrounded by and supported by a team of amazing women. I'm super lucky. It's been great. But getting there, it's probably intuitive. Don't be a jerk, right? If you need to work with others, they're handling just as many things as you are, and have competing requests. These are just some starters for you if you need them, but I'm assuming that everybody knows more about their organization than I do. I think the key thing that I want to share is like, you want to make sure that people understand that you're not just sending them out into the wilderness alone, right? You are willing to help, and that it's a collaborative team effort to get there. And then you also, like I said before, you want to utilize all of their perspective that they're going to bring to the table and add value with. And I have always relied on this to help me align with stakeholders. This is called the stakeholder matrix. This is in the resources tab. This is like you can find additional information on this if you're not familiar, but essentially you can place your stakeholders in a 4-box based upon their referent power at your organization, right? And how interested they are in your work. And then you know kind of where to, it's like a T-square, you know, it helps you measure how much effort you want to put into those relationships. The goal, all right, and this is me, this is my sales background coming into play. You want to bring some empathy to the situation and remember that somebody else's stakeholder matrix is different than yours, right? So your goal is to get, right, your problem into their stakeholder matrix and get some shared vision around keeping these folks managed closely. And just make it intuitive, right? Make it intuitive. Sometimes, you know, somebody can open an opportunity for somebody else. Sometimes it's just, you know, saving a bunch of time down the line. And, you know, it's a great old man expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I don't know if anybody else's grandfather used to say that, but it's relevant today. And here's the secret password, right? This is something I've used throughout my career to generate what I call urgent curiosity that helps people, sets the stage for them to feel the urgency of your stakeholder. And it's, if that stakeholder was in the room with us, what do you think there are 1 or 2 things they were likely to ask about or poke holes in, right? And that helps generate some lateral pressure. I see some heads shaking. This is good. I'm not just out there in the hinterlands. But again, it's somebody else has competing priorities. You know, you are not what they think about all day, even though you might need this. You need it, but it is up to you to convey that they also need this, right? All right, that's extraneous. Okay, so now you have this great dashboard, but there's still, if a dashboard falls in the forest, does anybody hear it, right? Does it make a sound? I have found, maybe the hard way, through building a delivery layer ourselves, which I'll show on the next slide, that there's this myth of self-service analytics to unpack. In 2024, it's table stakes. You have to have a delivery layer. That way, when people need something, they can go there, but they're not always going to need something, right? And they may not even have a good habit around it. One thing, I mean, my senior leadership team may be more data literate than some of our other team members. We've got people who are teaching analytics. We have people that are teaching applied nutrition, right? It's not a fair fight. Some people, this is like their world and they're just chomping at the bit. They want more. And some people are like fighting with their hand tied behind their back and they're just beginning their data journey. It's the law of large numbers. We have a very large workforce, right? So this is about throughput and habits through a workforce. This is about getting data used, right? This is about making data, the utility of data. And so we built, my first year, I did like 40 or 50 interviews across the organization and, you know, put my consultant hat on and heard that it would be really valuable to get rid of the hunt and peck, right? Like people were, because we have central services, some things are maintained on one Tableau server and then another, and then maybe some are not on a Tableau server, right? You have to like know a guy. And that's not successful, right? So the first vision was let's collate everything in a SharePoint site. You can put anything in a SharePoint site. I can put data literacy resources there. I can put reporting there. I can put systems maps there, whatever. And this is great. You know, we need this. It's good to have it. But honestly speaking, middling adoption, right? Like humbling, incremental gains, but middling. So I'm a salesperson, right? Can't get that out of my blood. I am willing to be assertive, right? And the way that I'm going to do that is through automation. And I believe that email is the value zone. This is it. I don't care how busy people get. They are going to check their email 20 times a day. I want to be there. That is where I want to be. It's an attention economy. I want to show up at 8 a.m., right? With the thing that you need in the format that you needed it, right? On the day that you need it. Right, so what's the best way to get there? Well, oh wow, that's a great slide, huh? There must have been something on there. Oops. Well, anyway, Power Automate is better than Tableau subscriptions because it allows me to personalize, to customize, and as a result of those two things, it creates a lot more speed to value, right? And and I can scale it much easier to scale because I can see everything at a glance the way we're doing it now. And this is the flow that we're using to accomplish this. So anyone who's not, I know what it was. I had an introductory slide for Power Automate, which was the suggestion of my friend Tessa Hoke, who I believe is here and also knows Nick. That's the 6 degrees of separation of Portland, Maine. Thank you, Tessa. This is the way this, so first of all, Power Automate is like a SaaS tool that allows for automations. Is anybody not familiar with Power Automate? Okay, belongs to the Microsoft suite of tools. It integrates with the Power Suite. It's like make.com or Zapier or any of these tools that allow you to create automations with low code. There's some code that's necessary, but it's not crazy. First, we tried to build a Python SMTP server, and that was just not great because we have to get through an Azure directory. This hooks you in automatically with your credentials. Tip from the top. So this runs on a recurring basis and just initializes a date variable and then checks. Here's what it does. It's going to check across all of these to these Booleans, and then it's going to search for a string, find out what report we want to send, and then it is going to call this Excel sheet. And you're going to see I have a bunch of links here, an internal name that we've had for the dashboard, and then recipients and emails, right? So this is what I mean by scaling. Remember how once the ad drop period is over, we want people looking at a new dashboard? This is a set it and forget it tool. At the beginning of the year, I can load up all the different views and just hit play, right? And then I never have to come back to it. And the thing that hems you up is tech debt, right? The technical debt to have to remember at the right time to go back and send the thing to the person. It's like, it's not, I want to be working on other stuff, much longer vision strategy stuff. And I can't do that if I have all this reporting debt that I have to serve. So this is an effort to scale and deliver what we need at the right time. And we do that through saving the custom views that you can make in Tableau. So this enables us to sort of load up the year in advance. And again, set it and forget it. Everybody loves rotisserie chicken. Okay. And this is what it's going to look like, right? In the end, this is what you get. You get a personalized email. So it's a bot, but it feels less like a bot if it comes from me and it's got your name in it. And then we can do that pre-filter and custom linking that we have talked about. So we're delivering the right thing to the right people. You can see this goes out every Tuesday morning when the data point refreshes. It's right in the subject line. Gets, again, so sales background, right? People have to see your logo 13 times to commit to purchase on average. And some people are 40, some people are 3, on average 13 times. So repetition matters, right? Repetition with the right emotion matters. So any way I can personalize it, I'm going to. And then the custom reminders and notes is all about scaling, right? So as we're trying to get throughput across a diverse workforce, having a few reminders there. This is what Tableau subscriptions couldn't allow me to do, some of these functions, right? I could set subscription reminders for people, but I can't deliver the, hey, remember when you're looking at this dashboard, keep these things in mind, right? There's a lot going on. Everybody has a bunch of irons in the fire. And as we're trying to scale across people, I can't be well, I mean, I am responsible for making sure that everybody has that support, but I can't do it one-to-one. There's just not enough of me to go around. So trying to use some automations to help there in building our data habits and hygiene with automation. Yeah. Any questions about this? Do we want to maybe pause for questions here? Anybody have questions about Power Automate or its functions? Tyler?
So as you roll this out and we think about adoption and use of the actual data asset on Tableau, are you finding ways to measure engagement with the actual insights that you're delivering personally, so to speak? as opposed to just the traditional, the user logged in, they looked at the dashboard, they engaged with it. Great. My job is my job is done. Have you kind of taken it to this level and said, how many people are engaging with this layer of insight?
It's a great question. And I think that's like probably the evolution of where we are. Honestly speaking, this was a pilot earlier this year that the demand was instant, right? So within 24 hours, not to toot my own horn here, but within 24 hours, I heard from every senior leader that this was right. This is my proof. It was just like everyone was like, this is exactly what we needed, right? So now we're starting with the credit hour dashboard. It's for a specific audience, right? It's for people who are either in charge of a portfolio or a program manager, right? These people are a little more engaged with that one. But the tool itself, to your point, is now I can do this for any report I want, right? Now we know what we're doing. It's just a copy paste, do a few tweaks, dump the right link in the Excel sheet, and there are many reports that we want to convene groups around. Like there's a new one that we've got that measures average class size. So budgets for our college and our programs are set by an average number of people that are gonna, it's like we're like optimizing an airline, right? Planes are gonna fly whether or not there are people in the chairs, right? You need a certain number of people in the chairs to make it economically viable, right? So we want to optimize towards an average class size. That work group is quite diverse, right? And our average, as Northeastern has expanded over the years, average class sizes have slowly dropped a little bit, mostly because the global network campuses don't have as, RU's doing great, but there's not always the same level of demand for every type of class all the time, as there historically has been in Boston. So the average class size initiative is an effort to bring multi or cross-dimensional work groups at the college together to look at it every week or every 2 weeks as we're leading up to class size to figure out how to optimize the schedule. So that one's going to be really important. And there are, to answer your question directly, there are like meetings being scheduled around that tool that this is going to service. So this will deliver the dashboard on the day of that meeting for those work groups, right? Do the question justice? Okay.
If you have the whole Microsoft Directory, Active Directory,
Oh yeah.
plus this, then I've always wanted to know if you could have like in the past week, here's the top vizzes
Ooh.
in the server and for your organization. Like, what are people clicking on, and suggest content proactively, so that you could be like, we have, that's a common complaint in organizations, is like, I just don't know where to go. There's too many dashboards. I don't know what to click on. Like, but then bring those to the top. I don't know if it would change meaningfully over time in an interesting way, but like, there's usually the top 5 for the past week, and bring that to someone's attention as a VP. Here's what your people are clicking on, or people at your peer level in your org. Here's what they're going to go do and look at.
Can I steal that?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
This is very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, well, this is the end. I mean, we can open it up for questions. Essentially, like, here's your takeaway reminders, right? If you need to build back better, one way to do it is through collaboration. Don't necessarily assume you're alone. Don't leave anybody else alone, and don't assume that people are going to just pick up on your new process. You gotta be out in front of their needs. And automation can help you do that. Yeah. So here are some resources, right? Hit me up after if you need more. This will go out in the presentation. And oh yeah, I didn't want to forget to thank all my people. Orange is the best color. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Joe. Questions in the chat or in the room?
Any other questions in the chat? I've got nothing but ideas. Yeah, well, I'll take ideas.
The question over here.
Joe, I'd like to know, since you've started your career, what are the things that you have done to improve this particular process as far as meeting with stakeholders and so forth? You know, when we first get in, we like jump in. Are there specific questions that you always ask before you start something?
Great question. And yes is the answer. So, you know, discovery is painstaking, but you got to dig in early and do a gap analysis, right? Like put your consultant hat on and it's where are we now? Where do we want to be? And it's not good enough to just ask one person. You have to like walk around it from different points of view. I think that's maybe my best tip there is to not, you know, you want to move quickly, right? So you ask people like, what do you need? What do you need? But sometimes you'll find by asking that question to more than, you know, through think the commonalities rise to the top, right? And that helps you I mean, maybe this all goes back to like prioritization because you're going to get a laundry list of stuff that you need to do and nobody can do your full. I mean, everybody has a roadmap, right? So this might be a question about how do you prioritize your roadmap? So what are the specific questions? I mean, they're mostly centered on gap analysis questions. And then, you know, what data do you, what kind of insight do you feel like you, what problems are you trying to solve, right? Sometimes we make this assumption that people have the data they need or that they're thinking about problems the same way we are, right? So I try to like get rid of my own bias as much as possible and then dig into where their people are, like especially if I'm talking to a unit leader, I want to know where their bottlenecks are, where their people are constantly hemmed up in decision making on their processes. Try to get to know their processes as much as possible. I'm of the mind that like, you know, a lot of the corporate world since the 70s has been seeing the workforce as a risk. And of course there are risks in your workforce, but they're your best asset as well, right? So a lot of the way I think about things are through the lens of empowerment and how I can help people do what they need to do. Like, I honestly feel if people are safe and well supported, they're going to do great work. So it's convenient. It's a good thing this is over. We got some construction going on around the corner for those who are online. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure if you were looking for specific questions, but I think I gave a few. Yeah.
Some ideas.
Yeah. So I love that you're using the custom views. Just wanted to let you know, I've played with this in the past. If you have, for example, like a slicer or a filter that is like by person and you don't want to make like 200 custom views, you can input URL parameters that can interact with the filters and parameters on your workbook. And so if you, for example, have like a parameter that is like the user's email address or something like that, since you're going to know that through the Power Automate, you can add that parameter to the link that is being sent to them. So when they click on it, it could pre-filter the dashboard just for them. So they don't have to like click in and then filter to their own name. Like if the custom views weren't going to cut it at that level of detail.
Interesting.
Yeah, pretty cool. We used to do that for like if you were jumping like to a dashboard like from Salesforce or your CRM and you wanted to pre-filter the dashboard you were viewing from the account that you were looking at in Salesforce.
Interesting.
You could send like the account ID over and use that to pre-filter the dashboard as they were loading it up.
Connect about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's interesting. I got Salesforce reports I'd like to customize.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this was good because you could build a custom hyperlink in Salesforce that would be different for every account because it's just a calculation that uses the account ID. And then when they click on it, you'll go to Tableau and then you'll have a dashboard that is pre-filtered for that account. So something you could do. And then the other thing I thought of was you're just having the link. Do people ever ask for like, can I get a snip or can I get a view or anything like that? Like, can I get the data canned in here?
Yeah, I mean, right now where we're starting where we started this year is with those portfolio aggregations. But of course, the first move is like, let me forward this to my people. And every single one of those folks really only cares about their program. Not that they don't care about everybody else, but you know, we all have our own.
Like in the email, it's just a hyperlink. You don't have like any data or
no, that's that would help scaling.
Do people like that? Or would they like, or do they ask for that?
Well, I think that could, you know, like going from like associate dean who's in charge of a portfolio to all of the program managers who are in charge of individual programs. We've got 50 programs in a portfolio, or 30 anyway. It's like, that could be very useful to then not have to create a different view for each of those and based on.
Oh, for the hyperlinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was saying for like, people are just getting the link to the dashboard in the email without, and then text. Like there's no picture. You with like a Tableau subscription, you click do the image.
No, for anybody who's not using the Tableau subscription feature yet, it will take a snapshot of your data and put an image in there. And it feels like that's next, and kind of doing what I did in the slide where, like if I were going to do an image, I might want to do like an image like this of a dashboard that calls out different things and visually. So I thought about doing it that way, but I hadn't thought about doing image snippets based on links. That would be cool.
Well, what you could, I think you can interact with just their normal REST API to request an image of the dashboard, and you could do that with your Power Automate to request an image of whatever element of the dashboard that is the center focus.
Neat.
And then just put it in part of your email. I don't know how Power Automate can interact with the API, but I'm assuming that it could.
That would reduce I'm sure nobody likes to wait for anything to load, right? So that could further the speed to value. I like that idea. Patrick's trying to talk.
I was going to say,
Thank you.
we're probably coming up on time if there's another question in the room. Anybody got anything? I was just going to say Power Automate's really cool. I'll just put a plug because this is a Tableau event for the, Copilot Einstein coming into Tableau's future roadmap development. I'm really excited to see like what that'll do to get. Then the Pulse tool you were saying is also really, really interesting to have like AI scrape dashboards and then put like bullet points into those emails. That is cool to say, like, when you go to this dashboard, keep these things in mind, but then like also have in the email somebody on a subway or a, thing in the morning, they can have their smart speaker say, this was up in them, like, to the extent you want to do that type of work, but like a really busy executive type of person could get like 4 things read to them by their Siri speaker or their whatever. Is that the world we want to live in? I don't know if I want to spend my breakfast time listening to Siri read off stats from my dashboards while I'm trying to talk to my kids or something.
That's an interesting idea. But one of the limitations here is it's made sense to have so far is like one flow per dashboard. There's this other issue where you can't have more than, fair warning, I ran into this one. You can't have more than 8 nested conditions in a Power Automate. Otherwise you have to call a child flow. That is the current problem. Thank you, Tria, for investigating that. So we're running into that as we're trying to scale. So putting multiple reports into one email isn't something we've been able to figure out yet, but it's coming. Hopefully Tableau figures it out first. All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Joe. And I'm going to hand you off to my co-hosts to wrap up.
Hello. Oh, great. Can we get one more round of applause for Nick and Joe? And by show of hands, who is dying to present at our next session? Yes. Anybody else? We can talk after this. All right, I'll take one. Awesome. And then I'm just also curious, by show of hands, who is already on Tableau Cloud? 1, 2, you guys are the same, right? 3. And what about server? And who is here that does not have a cloud or server environment and is learning Tableau, maybe using desktop? Okay. You'll be on cloud soon. Cool. Tyler, are you going to present on Tableau Cloud? That will be the migration from server to cloud. Are others considering a migration from server to cloud? Maybe show of hands. Okay. Awesome. Us too. Great. So for those who don't know me, I'm Elena. I work for WEX, so that building right there. I manage an analytics team. Ivy's a part of my team. June's an honorary member of my team. One thing we just want to call out is WEX is always hiring analytics roles. And so if you're looking for a new opportunity, please be sure to check us out. Is there anybody else in the room where your organization is hiring for people who may know Tableau or be interested in Tableau that you want to make a quick pitch? Yes. 1 second. There's people remote that may be here.
Hi, Tom O'Hara. I work at Architecture. We're a data and analytics shop here in Portland. We're currently looking for a data visualization analyst. I guess the focus is maybe a bit more Power BI, but Tableau is a partner of ours, so Tableau is welcome too.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? Great opportunity. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, I work for a consultancy and we've got several open positions, data analyst, data scientist, data manager, and so on. It's called the Action Company, as in using your data for action. And it's all for a very, very big manufacturing corporation.
Cool. And then again, just want to thank everybody for coming, both on the phone and here in the room. A couple housekeeping things. Those mugs are for everybody. So if you don't have a data mug yet, please get
Can
one.
we just have one more thing?
Yes.
We talked about the hiring. Is anybody looking for work right now
Oh, good
or
one.
anything or
Jiyun.
stuff?
I mean, I am looking for work, but I'll talk with you both because I did apply to Action last night and have been eagerly pursuing WEX. So figure it out.
Awesome. Anybody else? Great. Oh, we may have a hand. That was a joking hand, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so yeah, and then there's also still food left over. So please, if you don't take it, Agata's going to have to take it all home to her family for later today. Or you're supposed to take it or you're not supposed to take it. Okay, cool. All right, and I'll leave to Jonathan to kind of pre-intro our next session. The timing is going to be dependent on our very exciting speaker, but I'll leave it to Jonathan.
So like Patrick said, we're trying to do these every 3 months or so. So in December or January, it kind of depends on our speaker, Andy Cotgreave, who's a senior Tableau evangelist, co-author of the Big Book of Dashboards. And that group has another book that they're working, and he does assorted podcasts and things like that. So that'll be really great. We'll probably have you too to do that. And anything else besides that?
Really great list of Tableau. Yeah, really great list of Tableau user group events coming up. So check that out with Tableau itself. Some really cool things coming up in Europe if you have the right time to attend those. But they're all posted on, as well as ours will be posted as a presentation and the recording if you want to send that to colleagues. But that'll do it for us in September of 2024. See you soon. Thank you.